Sit down. No, not that stool, the booth. I want to see your eyes, and I don't want you bolting for the door when the truth gets heavy. The bartender already knows not to bother us for a while. The ice in this glass is the only cold thing you should be focusing on right now. Don't look at the phone. Don't stare at the door. Look at the condensation running down the cheap glass. That's the physical manifestation of what's happening in your chest. Liquid tension, ready to break. You came here because the silence at home, or where home used to be, is deafening. It's not just the absence of her voice. It's the low, subsonic hum of self-hatred mixed with a raw, impotent rage. That is the sound of a fundamental promise broken, and the promise wasn't to her. It was to yourself. We drank the poison of the modern mythology. We were told that maturity meant being pliable. We thought that understanding the nuances of her emotional landscape meant automatically granting permission for every behavioral whim. We thought being nice was synonymous with virtue, and we thought that being the good guy would serve as armor against abandonment. It didn't. It served as a target. Here is the straight talk you won't get from anyone who still fears your pain. You didn't lose her. That phrase suggests a cosmic accident, a theft, a slip of the hand. You didn't lose her. You abandoned the post. You went AWOL from the duty station that required you to stand firm, to be the anchor, and to hold the center of your own life. You need to admit the tactical error right now before we talk about anything else. You are here because you failed to protect your internal sovereignty. The lie that killed your relationship and nearly killed your self-respect is the one whispered by the culture and amplified by every well-meaning, conflict-averse bystander. Just communicate logically. This is the lie told by therapists who never fought a war. It assumes that a relationship is a parliamentary debate where the most eloquent argument wins the day and peace is achieved through mutual rational concession. This thinking is chess. It is structured, sequential, and entirely abstract. But the war is not chess. The brutal, hard truth you must accept is that every serious, long-term relationship is a constant, low-level stress test. It is not a test of your verbal fluency or your capacity for compromise. It is a test of your internal anchor. A man is always being assessed, not consciously, but on an instinctual, primal, visceral level, for strength, competence, consistency, and his unwavering allegiance to his own sworn principles. She was not looking for a debate partner. She was looking for the bedrock. She was looking for the wall that would not move, even when she leaned on it with her full weight. When she pushed, she needed to feel resistance, not collapse. The resistance isn't aggression. The resistance is frame. The resistance is the non-negotiable definition of who you are and what you require to function honorably in the world. And what did you offer when the test came? Negotiation. You offered logic where she was demanding substance. The title applied is harsh, but necessary. You weren't abandoned, buddy. You were tested against a standard you voluntarily let slip. You failed the examination of frame. The moment you let her external reaction dictate your internal structure, you stopped being the bedrock. You became sand, easily shifted by the tide of her mood. And sand is useless for building a home. Let's move the magnifying glass now. We need surgical precision. We need to pinpoint the exact moment you confused compromise with surrender. This is the error of the soft flank. It wasn't one massive explosion that ended things, it was 1,000 tiny retreats. Take a moment. Think back not to the final argument, but to the first moment you felt that acid taste in your throat, the moment you knew you should speak, but didn't. You played the game of Xadrez when she was playing wrestling. She didn't care about the facts of the argument, she cared about the texture of your spine. She was testing your center. Were you offering a logical defense of your position, or were you merely offering concessions to buy temporary silence? You chose the concessions, and that is where the erosion began. This isn't about big, dramatic betrayals. This is about mistake zero, prioritizing her short-term comfort above your long-term principles. Maybe your principle was discipline. Maybe it was the necessity of 2 hours of focused work every Saturday morning. She wanted you to skip it, just this once, for a brunch that wasn't necessary. You weighed the discomfort of the potential argument against the value of your principle. You chose to skip the work. You chose ease, that just this once decision multiplied over years is a breach in the fortress wall. It teaches the world, and importantly, it teaches her, that your stated values are flexible under mild pressure. You didn't just sacrifice the 2 hours of work. You sacrificed the fundamental trust in your word to yourself. She didn't consciously think, he is weak. But her instinctual self registered it immediately. He can be moved. His stated duties are conditional on my mood. You were afraid of the conflict, and that fear had a physical manifestation. Did you feel the need to check her facial expression before stating your needs? Did you rehearse your defense in the shower? Did you find yourself walking on eggshells, tailoring your communication to preemptively soothe a potential negative reaction? That physical tension, that supplicant's posture, is a betrayal of the sovereign. The supplicant's posture is the moment you stopped leading your shared life and started pleading for validation or peace. You effectively handed her the leadership role. You gave her the rudder of the ship because holding it felt too stressful. And here is the grim paradox. Once you stop leading, she doesn't respect you for being pliable. She resents you for forcing her into a position of leadership she never truly wanted, or at least never wanted with a man who wasn't strong enough to bear the weight. She started leading the relationship, all right. She started leading it right out the door. You confuse the roles. A strong man in a relationship does not dictate every move. He sets the direction and holds the boundary. He creates the structure within which both parties can flourish safely. When you fail to provide that structure, when you are merely reactive to her emotions rather than acting based on your internal code, the framework collapses. You ceded your authority, not because you were humble, but because you were afraid of the friction necessary to maintain the structure. You became a man who preferred silence to truth, and the price of silence is high. She stopped seeing a sovereign, a complete self-governing entity. She stopped seeing the man whose energy grounded her. She started seeing a dependent, a man whose validation came entirely from her presence and approval. And dependents are not partners. They are liabilities. When you fail to state your truth, that truth doesn't vanish. It turns inward. It calcifies. It becomes the internal rust that makes your movements stiff and your presence tentative. She senses this physical tightening, this internal hesitation, and it registers in her system as danger. Not physical danger, but relational danger. The danger of relying on a weak structure. The more you offered validation, attention, and compliance, the resources of the needy, the less value those resources held. You mistook presence for competence. You were always there, always agreeing, always trying to fix, always seeking her approval. You made yourself endlessly available, making your time and energy the cheapest commodities in the relationship economy. Love is not compliance. Love requires integrity. When you are unwilling to risk conflict to uphold your integrity, you communicate, without saying a word, that your integrity is secondary to the fleeting security of the relationship. That is the point where she ceases to see you as a man and starts seeing you as an object, a comfortable, predictable, but fundamentally uninspiring object that provides utility until a higher value option appears. The erosion begins subtly, like acid rain on marble. You become the dependable mascot of the home, the source of funds, the repairman, the walking ATM, the predictable schedule keeper. But you cease to be the source of dynamic masculine energy. You sacrificed the respect you needed to maintain your attraction for the comfort you sought to maintain the peace. And in doing so, you handed her the burden of leadership. She begins to manage you. She doesn't consciously hate you. She just instinctively realizes that she has to take over the decision-making process because your decisions are perpetually weighted by fear of her disapproval, not by your own internal compass. When a woman has to lead the man, the relationship fundamentally shifts into a maternal or managerial dynamic. The passion dies because there is no polarity left. You are now a logistical partner, not a romantic one. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are therefore redundant. The ultimate betrayal you commit is not against her, but against the man you know you are supposed to be. You look in the mirror and see a man optimized for domestic tranquility, stripped of the ambition, edge, and integrity that once defined his potential. That dull, self-betrayed feeling you carry around, that is the debt you accumulated by trading your truth for temporary peace. That debt is palpable. She senses this fraudulence. She cannot articulate it, but she feels it deeply. How can she respect the man who is willing to burn his own life's map simply to avoid a brief argument about how the map should be folded? How can she trust a man whose primary motivation is avoiding conflict? That man is unreliable under pressure. That man is not sovereign. This is the central paradox modern men face. You think compliance is the price of admission to a happy home, but compliance is merely the down payment on your eventual redundancy. You try to manage her emotional state to manage your comfort, but true masculinity is not the management of external variables. It is the absolute sovereignty over internal ones. Let's talk about the specific points of no return, the quiet, irreversible choices that seal your fate long before the actual breakup. These are the moments when you willingly betray your telos, your highest purpose, for tranquility. The first betrayal is the betrayal of purpose. Every man, whether he admits it or not, needs a driving mission beyond the boundaries of his home. When you enter a relationship, she tests this mission, not maliciously, but instinctively. She will demand time, attention, emotional energy, and compliance that directly competes with the requirements of your purpose. The irony is cruel. She was attracted to the man defined by his uncompromising mission, yet she demands that he compromise that mission for her convenience. When you comply, she loses respect. She doesn't want a man who makes her the center of his universe. She wants a man whose universe is so vast and compelling that her inclusion in it feels like an honor and a challenge. When you demote your purpose to prioritize her comfort, she stops viewing you as the source of directional energy and starts viewing you as a dependent, predictable resource. The second betrayal is the betrayal of truth. The small lies and concealments intended to maintain the illusion of harmony. You pretend you are fine when you are not. You agree with a direction you fundamentally oppose. You hide a legitimate need because articulating it might lead to conflict. Every time you swallow an authentic truth, you don't make the relationship healthier. You simply load the emotional debt onto your soul. This is resentment accumulating interest. And that resentment leaks out eventually, not as conscious anger, but as low-level irritation, passive aggression, sexual disinterest, and a creeping malaise that permeates the relationship like stale air. The worst part of lying to keep the peace is that you teach her that she cannot handle your truth. You assume she is too fragile to deal with reality, and that assumption is deeply condescending. She is an adult. If you cannot speak the truth of your experience to the person you sleep next to, you do not have a partner, you have a hostage negotiation. And you are the hostage. The third and perhaps most destructive betrayal is the betrayal of risk. Masculinity is fundamentally correlated with the willingness to face necessary risk, whether physical, financial, or emotional. When you structure your life purely around risk avoidance, avoiding financial risk to maintain stability, avoiding emotional risk to maintain harmony, you become structurally soft. A man who avoids emotional conflict is signaling that his ability to self-regulate and operate under tension is low. He is advertising his fragility, The greatest risk you can take in a relationship is the risk of losing her. When you become so terrified of separation that your decisions are designed purely to guarantee her stay, you lose the gravitas necessary for her to want to stay. The moment you give up the power of walking away, not as a threat, but as a sovereign possibility, should the partnership require the sacrifice of your soul, you forfeit the dynamic tension that fuels attraction. You became the man who guarantees security, and security, divorced from challenge and respect, is not the foundation of love. It is the foundation of institutional tolerance. He's worked extra hours to pay for the house. He's stopped seeing his contentious friends. He manages the household logistics, and he rarely challenges her opinion. He feels secure. He has earned his peace. And then she walks away. The common narrative for the dumped man is utter shock. But I gave her everything. I did everything she asked. Hypergamy is not a moral failing in women. It is a natural, ruthless system of relational selection judging value. It is the impersonal force that demands growth. The moment your value plateaus because you stop growing to keep her comfortable, the contract is broken. You taught her you were static, and life, especially a life worth living, is inherently dynamic. When she leaves, the true pain is not the loss of her presence, but the realization of the wasted time and the betrayal of your own potential. You wake up suddenly, stripped of the relational structure you used as a scaffold for your identity, and you realize, I don't know who I am anymore. I optimized myself for her approval, and now that approval is gone, there's nothing left. You cannot fix the relationship by trying to fix her or by seeking external validation from her. The only path forward is the total, radical re-establishment of your internal sovereignty. This is where Stoicism stops being a philosophical discussion and starts being a survival manual. Your primary duty is not to be a good boyfriend, husband, or father. Your primary duty is to be a sovereign man. Everything else flows from that internal state. A sovereign man is one who derives his worth and direction entirely from his chosen internal code of conduct, regardless of external circumstances, rewards, or approval. You must decouple your actions from their emotional outcome. Do what you know is right, true and necessary for your purpose, even if it creates friction, disagreement, or disappointment in others. You must stop seeking permission for your own life. When you ask permission, you elevate her to the status of your manager. When you inform her of your decision and manage the fallout with calm accountability, you remain the architect of your own life. The Stoics called this building the inner citadel. For the modern man, it means recognizing that the security of your emotional life cannot be contingent on the stability of your relationship. You must develop systems, skills, and practices that allow you to stand entirely on your own feet, financially, emotionally, and socially. You must cultivate meaningful male relationships that function as a counsel and a support system separate from your partnership. You must have hobbies, skills, and intellectual pursuits that she cannot participate in, that remain solely yours. These are not walls you build to keep her out. They are the retaining walls that ensure your sense of self does not collapse if the external structure fails. When you are radically self-reliant, you enter the relationship as a choice, not a necessity. This changes the quality of your presence. You are no longer clinging. You are choosing to share your abundance. This is the only type of man a high-value woman respects and desires. The man who doesn't need her, but profoundly chooses her. If being the man you are meant to be, the ambitious, focused, truthful, and challenging man, causes the relationship to end, then that relationship had to end. It was not built to house the man you are becoming. Your integrity must be non-negotiable. If a woman requires you to diminish yourself to keep her, the exchange rate is too high. She is asking for your soul, and no amount of comfort is worth that price. You must be willing to walk the path of your purpose alone if necessary. This acceptance is not a threat, and it is certainly not arrogance. It is simply the commitment to the highest standard of self. This radical acceptance of potential loss paradoxically makes you less likely to lose the relationship because it elevates your perceived value. When she realizes your highest loyalty is to the truth and to your mission, she realizes your presence in her life is not guaranteed, and she must rise to meet your standard rather than waiting for you to drop to hers. What does this mean for finding and maintaining genuine love? It means shifting the entire paradigm from dependency to alignment. True partnership is not the merger of two incomplete halves seeking wholeness. That leads to codependency, resentment, and the managerial relationship. True partnership is the intersection of two sovereign, whole, integrated individuals who choose to align their separate powerful trajectories. They do not merge, they orbit. She should see your purpose as the gravitational center of your life, and she should choose to enter that orbit because the energy, the challenge, and the direction of your movement are compelling. Her role is not to be your manager or your satellite. Her role is to be your strategic ally, the trusted co-pilot who understands and respects the destination of your journey, even when the turbulence is uncomfortable. This requires massive courage on your part. It means navigating life with the implicit understanding that you would rather be alone, operating fully in your integrity, than compromised and partnered. That resolve, that uncompromising devotion to your own life's calling, is the most attractive, most enduring form of security you can offer a woman. It's not financial security. It is the security of your unshakable character. You must choose to be the man who is sometimes difficult to deal with, but always respected, over the man who is always easy to deal with, but fundamentally ignored. You were not put on this earth to make a woman feel safe in the short term. You were put here to build, to struggle, to lead, and to achieve your own definition of greatness. If a relationship assists that mission, it is a blessing. If it requires the sacrifice of that mission, it is an impediment. The work ahead of you is not about learning manipulation tactics or reading self-help books aimed at pleasing others. The work is excavation. You must dig out the true man buried beneath the years of compliance, fear, and comfort-seeking. You must dust him off, give him a purpose, and integrate his truth into every interaction, starting today. The path of least resistance is the path of mediocrity. The path of integrity is steep, requires constant vigilance, and often forces you to disappoint people you love. But that disappointment, accepted and handled with stoic calm, earns you something infinitely more valuable than peace. It earns you self-respect, and self-respect is the only foundation upon which true, passionate, and enduring respect from others can be built. The moment you stand up, fully centered, and declare that your integrity is non-negotiable, that is the moment your life changes. Some relationships will dissolve immediately, and that is necessary pruning. Others will elevate, challenged by your new standard. Stop waiting for external conditions to align before you claim your authority. Stop waiting for her mood to stabilize before you speak your truth. Your mission is your anchor. Your integrity is your armor. Your acceptance of loss is your ultimate power. Go build the citadel. Go reclaim your telos. Go do it.